Last week was the roast of Tom Brady, and let's talk about it because I think overall it was a fun night. It's 3 hours of fun on Netflix. It was, I don't think we've ever seen a true sports star go ahead and get roasted. Tom Brady gets roasted all night long for all, his divorce, his crypto investments that went awry, and, who was the best of the bunch? Honestly, there was three comics I think that knocked it out of the park. Nikki Glaser, Tony Hinchcliffe, Andrew Schulz. All three of them are at the top of their game right now. You're watching comedians who are at their peak, who already have dedicated great audiences, who maybe, from the Tom Brady roast are now going to get an even bigger audience. So those three right off the bat. Nikki Glaser, I think she knocked it out of the park with some amazing jokes, especially the crypto joke about Tom Brady. Tony Hinchcliffe, when he got in, kind of like, again, was a surprise, like wander-in guest and just took it upon himself to go across the dais with the microphone and roast everybody, kind of a little differently than how everybody else had been doing the roast. He did it just like with the handheld microphone and went down the line, as opposed to being sitting there at the desk and doing it. So I think he did a great job. And then Andrew Schulz, again, a great writer, a guy who's built up his fan base over the last 5-6 years and just kind of blew up. And just, again, you're seeing three comics at the top of their game, knock it out of the park, who are great writers and great performers, and then also have great teams around them and just do a great job of what they're doing. Next on the list I want to talk about are, I guess, like the other comedians that were also involved. First off, KEvin Hart is the host. I think he did a great job as a host. It's not an easy gig hosting that. And, did I feel like he ran his punchlines a little bit? He did run over his punchlines a little bit, but I think what he did a really good job of was being the mouthpiece for the audience, especially at a live show. That's kind of what the host is supposed to do. The host is supposed to be the reactionary, the person who's reacting to each of the sets and watching everything kind of go back and forth and being the mouthpiece, especially for when things go off the rails, like they kind of did when Gronk went up on stage and spiked the shot glass and kind of, it said a lot of crazy things and like did a really good job. Like I'm going to have my flowers for Gronk in a minute or two. But overall, like I think it was a very fun roast, partially because KEvin Hart kept it very lighthearted and kept the pace going and was a good reactionary. Jeffrey Ross. Let's talk Jeffrey Ross, guy who is synonymous with roasts, right? He's been doing the roasts on Comedy Central for the longest time. Now he comes on to Netflix. He's done a whole bunch of other little shows with roasts as well. He had his own individual show with roasting. He is a guy who loves roasts. He loves being able to write jokes about an individual topic and take things down a notch. And I think he does a good job with it. Now, again, I think the thing with being synonymous with something means, listen, when people do an amazing job and they're right next to you, you don't get the flowers that you probably are due. And I think he did a really good job here. He did kind of step over the line with the Robert Kraft joke. Maybe. We don't know. We don't know if that was performative or not. Some people are saying it was performative. Some are saying it wasn't performative. Some are saying there wasn't any lines. Schulz said there was a line. So we don't really know. At the end of the day, I think that it creates a fun level of mystery to not know anyway, to know whether or not Tom Brady really told him to cut that stuff out or that it was, hey, like we're just kind of playing along and this is for the show, right? It's kafab, right? It's, you're performing for everybody. So we really don't know. We do know that, there was some lines that were maybe put in the sand, but we don't know what was really there when people found out Robert Kraft was going to be there. Because, again, that was actually a part of the discussion, was whether or not they even knew Robert Kraft was going to be there. So Jeffrey Ross, I think one of the things I appreciate with him as a comedian, as a roaster, is that he lays it on the line. The dude has no problem being the butt of the joke. And so, that's why I appreciate him as a roaster, is because you'll see him get dressed up and come up with these crazy outfits. And, sometimes that would be considered pretty hacky for some comics. But to do it for something like a roast where it's like, listen, we're all the butts of the joke here. We're all the clowns. So doing something that might be a little hacky, like dressing up in certain garb or certain way, in this case he dressed up as OJ from Hell. In other roasts he's done some other things. Some people might not be huge fans of that. I think he did a good job. He always kind of puts it down and just tries to go at it. And again, the most memorable moment for him obviously was the massage joke, but he also had some very good jokes about Dana White and the being the Mike Vick of for people. So I like Jeffrey Ross. I think he's done a lot in as far as like trying to get the roast to be more of a common thing. And unfortunately, I just don't think it's great that you're synonymous with one type of genre. But if that's what you want to be synonymous with, I think he does a good job with it. Then there was Sam J. Sam J got to play the role of the Patriots fan. And I think that's such a cool thing. We got to see Ben Affleck do that as well in the roast, but more as a character fan, whereas Sam J played a roaster who was a fan, which is kind of cool. Like, it's, usually you don't get that a lot, but you really only roast the people you love, as Jeffrey Ross would say. And thus, like, Sam J is a big Patriots fan. And thus, like, being like, hey, I'm a fan, and like, these are my jokes about it. And that's a cool set of shoes to get to step into as far as like an up and comer. And I think Sam J might be the biggest up and comer of this whole group as far as the comedians go. So it's nice to see somebody getting their flowers and being a part of something and getting to be a part of it because they're a fan of something. Like, that's a cool thing. Like, that's, again, it's something you can really respect down the line of like, hey, like, I'm a fan and I got to be involved. And that's so, like, I think it's just so interesting. It's so fun. I think it's very sweet and cool. And as a comic, I really appreciate that, because if I was involved with something similar, I would be very appreciative of it. And again, to keep quoting Jeffrey Ross, you only roast the things you love. Clearly, if you're a fan of something, roasting it's also part of that process. So I think some of the athletes did a really good job, too. I think some of the best athletes were Drew Bledsoe. Kind of reminds me of Shooter McGavin a little bit. Like, he had some Shooter McGavin vibes. He did the kind of thing with the wine glass that I know a few comics who do that, where it's almost like a timing prop. It's not like, I actually knew one person who used it as a real prop, but it's almost like a timing prop. Like, you can use it to slow down your pacing, and you can look at the wine and you can swish it around, you drink it. And you see that sometimes with cigars, when cigars used to be allowed on stage, people who smoke weed during their sets, things that, like, where they have things where they're able to slow down their pacing and be able to really pull the attention of the crowd. Like I said, it's a timing prop. It gets you an opportunity to, like, oh, I'm swishing this around, these lovely, this lovely juice that might be alcoholic or not. So I think Bledsoe did a good job. I think his demeanor, his delivery was very different too. And so it was cool seeing a guy who you would think would have all this animosity towards Tom Brady be involved with something that was like kind of celebrating Tom Brady, but also like was obviously a financial thing. Like, Tom Brady probably made a lot of money off of doing this. He didn't do it for free. Some of the rumors with the crypto stuff, like, maybe this was to reimburse him for what he lost in crypto. So, I think Shooter McGavin did a good job. I think the guy of all the football players who did the best job, Julian Edelman, man. That guy's got good timing, good pacing, does amazing impressions of Bill Belichick and Tom Brady. He does impressions of Belichick and Brady like a guy who's a friend of Belichick and Brady. Like, my cousin does impressions of his friends. If you did not know his friends, you get a vision of these characters. And that's kind of what Edelman does. He does these impressions of his friends. And, like, if you didn't know who Belichick was, you get a good vision of what Belichick's like in a room. Even if you've never met Belichick, even if you've never heard of Belichick. Same thing with Brady, right? His impression of Brady is this high, squeaky voice, because when Tom Brady would be breaking the huddle or running down the field and getting everybody jolted, his voice would get a little pitchy, apparently, according to Julian Edelman. And I think that's kind of an interesting thought, is like, oh, like, this guy who, we all think of as this macho dude has this kind of weird pitchy voice. And that's the number one thing that his friend pulls away from it when he does his impressions of him, is this high pitched, like, laser focus kind of thing. And it's listen, I think it's very endearing. I think Edelman's got a lot of charm. He is a very charming dude. He's got a lot of charisma, and he can deliver a joke. And, also it probably helps that he went to the Comedy Store and tested out his material with Jeffrey Ross. And it really showed. It showed that he did the game tape. He did the practice on it, and he crushed it. He knocked it out of the park. I also think Gronk did a good job. Not because he was really good at telling the jokes, but because his demeanor as a part of doing the jokes, like breaking the fourth wall, and like you could tell he's reading a teleprompter compared to a lot of other people. I think that was actually very entertaining for a lot of people. Like, not everybody can do it, right? It's the thing. It's the same thing as doing the Ron Burgundy thing, which I'll touch about in a bit. But, like, you can only get away with it so much But, like, if one person does it, it's not that big of a deal. If everybody started breaking the fourth wall, we're going to start being like, dude, this performance is kind of, like, losing its luster. So I think Gronk did a good job of kind of being the goof, not taking everything too seriously, playing into the bits, yes-anding, right? When Nikki Glaser does a bit about, Gronk and the cryptocurrency and, that not real money, Gronk plays it up and plays into it. I did say that wasn't real money. And I was kind of like, it was kind of a funny, like, play into that. And even when Gronk was telling the jokes, he played into the dumb thing and then leaned out of the dumb thing and then leaned back into the dumb thing. It was and then leaned into the party animal and spiked the shot glass, which might have been a little not recommended. That might have been when it started feeling like it was about to go off the rails. Him telling, KEvin Hart that he can suck his, what. That might have been a little bit of a, that was him going off the rails, but in a fun way. And I think that makes it kind of endearing and fun and entertaining. And this was an entertaining evening. And these were guys who had a lot of character to them. And, Brady surrounded himself with a lot of entertaining characters. And Gronk and Edelman and Bledsoe were all those people. Like I said, Bledsoe's a guy who you probably can make the argument should hate Brady, but doesn't. And it's kind of impressive that he doesn't. I want to touch on the rest of the dynasty, and then we'll touch on some of the other things that came up. Bill Belichick, right? Guy who I was actually a little shocked initially, thought he was kind of, just to say the word he used a lot of ums in the beginning. For a guy who's a head coach who was like big into public speaking, had to talk to the media every week, had to talk in front of a room full of football players and tell them, like, hey, you have to be here. This is cover 2. You're not doing your job. I think initially it came off as he was a little nervous, and I get that. And then eventually, like when it started coming down to roasting the players and picking on the players who were on the dais, some of them not even really roasting anybody. Like some of them were just on the dais as a part of the roast, like as like people who were there, like Matt Light. And he would go in and roast some of the players like Amendola and Light and all these guys who were up there. And that's kind of interesting because he seemed very at home doing that. He felt very comfortable picking on the players. The second it went to picking on the players, no problem. That's back to what he does. Such a good thing for him to get to roast players. But the second he was like up there trying to, like when he got up there initially, it seemed like he was very, I don't know, a little nervous. Once he got into coach zone and picking on people who used to play for him and work with him, it got very easy for him, it seemed like. And it got very enjoyable to watch. And then when he was done, right, he didn't take himself seriously this whole night, right? Like he came up to the Evil Emperor theme, kind of. Like they clearly didn't play the exact Star Wars theme because they're probably not allowed to, thanks to copyright reasons. But they definitely played like a similar version of it because of, hey, he used to be the evil emperor running the empire, and now he's kicked out of the empire, and now it's somebody else. So I think he did a very good job. I really enjoyed watching Belichick up there. I really just, you could see how much love he has for Tom, and, clearly this was a symbiotic relationship, him and Tom Brady and the dynasty, and, he even pokes fun at, the 10-part series on Apple that Robert Kraft was part of producing. And, I think he did a good job. And I really appreciate Bill Belichick as a coach and what he's done for coaching. And, I think as far as the dynasty group goes, he's the best of the rest. Like, hands down, I think he did a really good job. I also liked Randy Moss. I don't think, like, he had a very memorable set. The most memorable thing about his set was something that kind of kept getting brought up throughout the rest of the night, which was Randy Moss doesn't have a ring. My favorite joke about him was, wait a second, you guys got caught for, videotaping people practicing and deflating balls. Why didn't we cheat when I was on the team, Tom? And I thought that was actually one of my favorite bits of the night because it's very endearing because it's a guy who, listen, I came to the Patriots. We were winning like crazy initially. And then we lost to, Eli Manning with a catch. And just, like, again, like, it was such a, like, in the story of the Patriots, it is kind of funny that, like, this guy who was considered maybe the most talented player outside of Gronk, like, that of the pass catchers that Brady ever had, and he didn't get a ring. And so, like, him and Welker never get rings. And Welker also played with Peyton Manning and never got a ring, too. So it was kind of a weird situation with that. Did I talk about Edelman? I already talked about Edelman and Gronk. So Robert Kraft, I think there's a little bit about Kraft, but not really much. Like, I think Kraft did a good job of like doing his toast. I don't think they knew he was going to be there. He wasn't roasting anybody, so he's more of like the ancillary pieces to like the set dressing to it all. I don't even think they knew he was going to be there. I think that was why like some people didn't know if they were allowed to tell a joke about the happy endings. Let's talk Tom Brady, right? Tampa Brady. I don't know why he did this. I don't know why. I will say this. If you listen to his delivery and the way he spoke as part of when he was doing his part of the roast, it very much reminded me of Justin Bieber. And I said this to a friend of mine earlier. And it's kind of like, it's weird, I think, for two reasons. One, I think they're both famous for having these weirdly high-pitched voices at certain moments that, like, you don't expect from them. And also because they're these guys who are just so big. Like, they're like untouchable at this point, right? Like Brady's been on top for 15 years. Bieber, when he did his roast, like he was a child and then he was a star, and he was a child star and then had been on top for like a decade and then was having a bunch of adults roast him. And like to both of those people, to have these other people who like some of them look like Jeffrey Ross and some of them are people who've lost to you, and some of these are people that you are actually providing their meals because you were so good at what you do. Like whether it was, Justin Bieber and Chris D'Elia, or right, with Tom Brady and the whole Patriots dynasty. Like the dynasty would not exist without Tom, just like it wouldn't exist without Belichick. It's a symbiotic thing. And so with Tom, it was very fun to get to hear him talk about like the ring camera bit about Belichick. I think that might have been my favorite joke that from Tom. But I also feel like his delivery felt very plastic outside of that. That was like everything else felt very plastic. It felt very like, oh, this is weird. It's weird that you're this like top of the world kind of guy. And that when people are taking shots at you, and they're also both Tom Brady and Justin Bieber are very hated. They're very hated for being very good at what they do. And so it's, they have their haters. But like, again, it's very weird because like their haters are really never anybody who matters to them. And you see it where like Brady is there, like, hey, all these people, like they're all fans of yours. They're all friends of yours. Like even Bledsoe, who's up on that stage with you, is a friend of yours. And like, this is a guy who you took his job. Like you Wally pipped him. And then, he never saw, he went to the Bills and got to live in obscurity there. So I look at what Brady did up there as kind of fun. Like, again, clearly there's some references to the crypto scam that he got involved with. I think that was the Sam Bankman-Fried thing where he lost a bunch of money. And listen, that happens. And, this is a way for him to recoup some of that money. A lot of talks about his marriage and like, why would you do this? It's like, I don't know, man. Like, it's over anyway. Like, I think at some point you just lose the shame thermometer and you're just like, who cares? Now, there is the story that he did not go to the after party because, I mean, you just spent 3 hours with these people on stage where they were roasting you. You probably wanted to go home and go to bed or hang out with your kids or try to explain to your ex-wife, like, hey, they didn't all mean you were banging the jiu-jitsu instructor, right? There's no way that was actually happening. I digress. Again, Brady, greatest of all time roasts, hands down. I think that was a very fun night. There were things we could have did without, I think. Again, the Bert and Tom thing wasn't really memorable. It was a little presentation. Felt like it was a PowerPoint. I don't think it was necessary. I think it was actually meant to be like a time break so that like some of the Patriots players who ended up sitting on the dais behind Tom Brady and Gronk and Edelman, so those guys can come out so they didn't have to sit there for 3 hours. I felt like a change-up time thing. It's like, oh, I can go to the bathroom. We have to sit there for 3 hours the whole night. We can just sit there for like an hour, hour and a half. And then, because I think eventually that was followed up by Bill Belichick coming on stage and then roasting some of the players. And so that's why they were all there, is really to support their coach as well in all of it. So in the end, I think that was kind of like the fun element of it, was that they had these players that were up there. And, the Bert and Tom thing was really kind of more to divert your attention, if anything, right? Get people to look at the TV screen and them and not have to really talk to Tom and really have everybody focus on what was going on in the background. Again, not memorable. Probably could have did without it. Either way, it doesn't really matter. I think it was a 3-hour roast. It's probably one of the first things I would have cut just because it wasn't memorable. I like both those comedians. I think they're both very talented. I think Tom probably could do well as a roaster. I don't know about Bert. I think Bert's just kind of the guy who wants everybody to like him, life of the party kind of dude. That's not a knock. I am a huge fan of Bert Kreischer. I just don't think that that's where like his skills lie, is to be like, hey, I'm going to go ahead and pick on people because I'm Bert Kreischer. No, he's the guy who wants you to like him. He wants people to be his friend. And I appreciate that a lot. The Ron Burgundy bit, again, another one of those not roast things that kind of came up, was like Will Ferrell being there and being Ron Burgundy and telling, everybody like, oh, Tom Brady's Eli Manning's a little bitch. I think that was actually kind of fun. That would have been more fun if you didn't have any other ancillary bits in there. That was the only one that was like the non-roast bit. And again, I think for people who were there, it might have been more entertaining. Like, it sounds like Edelman and Gronk and Bledsoe enjoyed that more than maybe like people who were watching it on TV. But if you were there, it sounds like it was something that was maybe a little bit more fun as a football fan, of like, because I think you do need that. It's something that's a roast, but it's also involving football fans. Like, again, they were shooting this at a stadium. These were football fans who were at this roast. And they were not there for the comics. They were there for Brady. So to know that, like, hey, you had the characters coming out as, like, it's almost like a wrestling thing, like the heel. That's what Ron Burgundy was trying to be. I think they could have merged the Ron Burgundy Ben Affleck bit, which this is where this is coming up to, which is the Ben Affleck bit was something that just didn't work. This is where being able to edit the roast and not having them live, I think, is kind of valuable. But I think there's also value in having it be live. I kind of like that it was live. I'm not going to knock the fact that it was live. I thought it was more enjoyable that it was live because I enjoy the live element of things. Like, as somebody who does stand-up personally, I enjoy things being live. I like doing live streams. I like doing those things. I also like the idea of editing things too, so I don't think it's a knock on either direction. But with the Will Ferrell, Ron Burgundy bit, I think that would have been fine if it was the only one of those like non-roast bits, or if you had him play the villain to Ben Affleck's like, I guess, fan hero, right? Because that was the idea of Ben Affleck's character in all this, right? Ben Affleck wasn't roasting. He was playing a character of like the super fan. But the problem was it didn't work. I think the way it would have worked is if you had a villain for Ben Affleck to play off of, either if he was playing against Ron Burgundy, and I think that would have actually been, now I'm coming up with this in my head, the best way to do it was to have him be like, yo, F you, Ron Burgundy, as part of his thing, and like kind of that back and forth, because I think that was more in the realm of things that were, I feel like they were closer together as far as bits go. One was the anti-fan, right? Ron Burgundy. I'm rooting for, Eli Manning and the Giants. And then, Ben Affleck was the super fan who wants to defend his player through thick and thin, through good and bad. And that's the thing. Like, if you know anything about football fans, I know a lot about football fans doing football stuff. And, dude, people will defend their players till, like, the cows come home, until the second that player's traded, and then they're dead to him. They are dead. I digress. There were some other quick things. The Robert Kraft toast, the Dana White, like, minute or two that he got up there to do his Kill Tony set. That was fine. I didn't think anything of it. I think that was kind of more of an opportunity to have Dana White there as well as a punching bag, because it's kind of nice to have somebody else there to hit, to make fun of, to use as a punching bag that's not just the true villain of the stage. And Dana White's kind of fun to make fun of. Like, and I think Andrew Shulz took a few shots at him. Jeffrey Ross made a few shots at him. Overall, I think he did a solid job. I didn't think every one of his jokes landed. He had some pretty dull ones. But overall, again, that was fine. Kim Kardashian, I didn't hate her being there. I felt very indifferent to it. I think I would have cut it for time, to be honest. I was shocked she got booed the way she got booed. I think a lot of people were. It's a live thing. It's going to happen. The fact that she took it like a champ, kind of impressive. I think there's a lot of people who don't like Kim Kardashian who probably fall into the camp of football fans just because she doesn't represent what they kind of see as, like, I guess, value. Like, again, that's, and not to say, like, I think I agree with that. I don't. I think that, like, every person is a value in life. I think there are people who might be jealous of what she has and what she's famous for. And so if you're a football fan and you're there celebrating somebody who, took your team to glory multiple times, who also took another team who's not, another franchise to the Super Bowl in 1 year, I think you can look at that and go, okay, like, the person who's the antithesis to that is somebody who is partially famous because of a family member who represented somebody in court and who also is a football player, which is kind of why, the O.J. Simpson from Hell bit was kind of funny with Jeff Ross. Yeah, and that's why I always like Jeff Ross, is he always kind of, like, he's willing to go outside the box and kind of, even if it seems a little hacky, jump on the grenade and be kind of the butt of the joke and try to do what he can to make people laugh and be entertained. So overall, I thought this was a fun night. It was a fun time to go ahead and watch 3 hours on Netflix to kill my time. What did everybody else think? Who was your favorite roaster? Who would you have wanted on the roast who didn't do the roast? Who do you think should be the next person roasted? I know there's a lot of talk about, would it be Tiger Woods or LeBron James? I don't think either of those people would ever do it. Is it possible there would be another sports person to do it? It's possible. I don't know how many of those there really are. I think Aaron Rodgers would have the pull to do the same thing, but he's not the greatest of all time. I don't think anybody's going to make that argument, even though he might, to some degree, he has an argument of being a very, 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 very good football player and one of the best quarterbacks of all time. I think the reason why Brady's the GOAT is that he got, to the Super Bowl so many times that it's like people don't get to do that. That's not really that's the anomaly with Brady is he got to do that so many times. That's why the dynasty was the dynasty. That's why the debate is what the debate is. It's not just that he was amazing. It's not just that Belichick was great at what he did. It was a combination of things, and it was so many different things working out and keying and tooling and reworking things and basically playing with what they could do within the rules of the NFL. I think that it was a fun night. At the end of the day, it was a fun night. I don't know how many other sports players you could do this with. I think LeBron and Jordan, I think the egos are just too strong in basketball a lot of the time. You are the guy. And with football, nobody succeeds without the other people in football. That's just football. Basketball, you took the 5 most talented people and put them on a team, they would dominate, right? That's just kind of how it is. Isn't that how That's kind of how LeBron got his first ring, right? Or one of his rings is that he just went to a super team and got a ring. So good job on all of them. I think this was a lot of fun. I can't wait to see who the next person is that they roast. It does seem like this is going to be a thing on Netflix for the future. And this might be a jumping point for some people to get to jumpstart their careers the way the Comedy Central roasts were for some people early on in their careers. Just like, Hinchcliffe got his start writing for the roasts, right? That was, you're talking about somebody whose career really technically started 15, 16 years ago because of these things. I think this is going to be maybe the start of a beautiful friendship. Maybe not. We don't know, but we'll see going into the future. It already seems like Comedy Central is dying as it is anyway. Netflix has basically built a lot of what it is now off of, basically what Comedy Central used to be. Now they just need to give Jon Stewart a show. But let me know what you think of the roast and leave a comment down below. Bye.
When I woke up this morning, I was feeling pretty dangerous. About the past and about the future.